Mr. President, Senator Shirkey offers Senate Concurrent Resolution 1-5, a concurrent resolution of tribute offered as a memorial for Tom Casperson, former member of the House of Representatives and the Senate. Whereas it is with great sadness that the members of the Michigan legislature learned of the passing of Tom Casperson. A steadfast public servant, he worked tirelessly during his legislative tenure for the residents of the Upper Peninsula and all Michiganders. And whereas a lifelong resident of Escanaba, Tom Casperson worked in his family's log truck business for 27 years, 12 as owner-operator. He was proud of the fact that he was the third generation to participate in the family business. Hours of working in the woods and driving log trucks through the Upper Peninsula forged his respect and sense of responsibility for the natural resources of our state and instilled a passion for their sustained and strategic use. He was active in his profession as a member of the Michigan Association of Timbermen and the Timber Producers Association. A log truck accident and his subsequent efforts to pursue safety measures and design changes in the industry inspired him to run for elected office. And whereas Tom Casperson served for 14 years in the legislature, relying on his experience in business and forestry, his faith and passion for the interests of the Upper Peninsula, and his willingness to work with all interested parties to address the problems facing our state. First elected in 2002 to the House of Representatives, he served 6 years representing the 108th District. In the House, he held the position of Assistant Majority Whip. During this time, he served as chair of the Conservation, Forestry, and Outdoor Recreation Committee and the Subcommittee on Forestry and Mineral Rights. He was vice chair of the Transportation Committee and minority vice chair of the Tourism, Outdoor Recreation, and Natural Resources Committee. He also served on the Agriculture, Energy and Technology, and Veterans Affairs and Homeland Security Committees, and the Appropriations Subcommittee on Transportation. And whereas in 2010, Tom Casperson was elected and re-elected in 2014 to the Michigan Senate, representing the 38th District for 8 years. In the Senate, he served as chair of the Natural Resources and Transportation Committees. He also served on the Outdoor Recreation and Tourism, Reforms, Restructuring and Reinventing, Family, Seniors and Human Services, and Finance Committees. And whereas Tom Casperson's ability to listen and courteously discuss contested issues provided him with an avenue to champion matters important to his constituents. He worked hard to find common ground and consensus on contentious issues, such as mining and land management, that allowed economic development in northern Michigan, while also protecting the natural resources that make the Upper Peninsula a special place. He took the lead on incorporating the Castle Doctrine in state law, protected the autonomy of the Mackinac Bridge, and required the state to implement a land management plan. He secured funding for a wide variety of key Upper Peninsula projects, including repairing infrastructure in Houghton County following the 1,000-year flood, aiding numerous communities impacted by the historic freeze crisis in 2014, and rebuilding a breakwall in Grand Marais Harbor that had been in disrepair for decades. His perseverance and ability to work across the aisle resulted in his sponsoring 118 bills that became public acts during his 14-year tenure as legislator. Moreover, he was recognized by many organizations as being an effective legislator, with several awarding him Legislator of the Year, including MERS News in 2013. And whereas Tom Casperson loved helping people, he was willing to listen and forge relationships and give the time to mentor the next generation of leaders, and he was humble and passionate in these efforts. His devotion to the people of Michigan and his passion to provide a voice for the Upper Peninsula will not soon be forgotten. The Senator's sincere faith in God, concern for people, and legislative efforts and achievements will impact the state for many years. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate that we offer this expression of our highest tribute to honor the memory of Tom Casperson, a member of the Michigan House of Representatives from 2003 to 2008, and the Michigan Senate from 2011 to 2018. And be it further resolved that copies of this resolution be transmitted to the Casperson family as evidence of our lasting esteem for his memory. The rules have been suspended to allow for immediate consideration of the resolution. There are no amendments pending to the adoption of Senate Concurrent Resolution 1-5.
Will all senators, staff, and guests in the gallery please rise for a moment of silence. All those in favor of the memorial resolution will remain standing. The resolution is adopted. We're honored today to have members of Senator Casperson's family with us to recognize a truly great man and a good legislator. Wife Diane Casperson is with us, mother-in-law Marilyn Christensen, daughter Ashley Wakefield and her husband Chan, with grandchildren Oakland, Brian, and Hugh, son Tom Casperson and wife Renee, grandson Gabe, daughter Hillary Ebbison and her husband Jason, son Dane Casperson and his wife Brittany, with granddaughter Reagan, sisters Eva Casperson and Cindy, sisters-in-law Judy Skrzydewski and Karen Moore, and Linda Fotenhauer, niece Emily and nephews Chris, Finn, and Ford, Uncle Donald and Aunt Mary Casperson, cousin David Casperson and Uncle Marvin and Aunt Barb Casperson, good friends Marty Fatante and Denny and Caramel Olson are all here today. Will the family of our good friend, Senator Casperson, please rise and be recognized by the Michigan Senate. And also thank the senators that served with him for coming today also. Blessings. The President recognizes the senator from the 38th District, Senator McBroom.
Thank you, Mr. President. Imagine being a young man with unreachable dreams of serving in the legislature, but having no connections or knowledge of how it's done. Stuck in this situation, the young man occasionally encounters the man who has that position. He's successful, popular, experienced, dauntless. But the young man's too shy and intimidated to ask him for any help or advice. This was me before the moment I met Tom Casperson, and he approached me in 2009 about running for office. He asked me if I wanted to run and suggested I could actually do it. I was still this odd kid pursuing a dream and now hearing about it from someone who had made it. 2 months later, my wife and I had dinner with Tom and his wife. We were just a couple of kids from a UP dairy farm, finding ourselves sitting with the UP equivalent of a celebrity. But despite my deference and hesitancy around him, he believed in me and never ceased to befriend and encourage me. By the time we each won our elections that fall, we developed a friendship that only grew over the next 10 years. Tom went from being like a father in the work to being a brother. We shared a passion for the Upper Peninsula, for Michigan, and for the country. We both believed in the people of the UP and their desire to work against an intrusive government, and even worse, any mindset that views the UP and its people as subservient to the whims and pleasures of people who live other places. and we love the Packers. A few weeks after we started our terms together in 2011, the Packers made their run to the Super Bowl. And Tom told me about how he used to rub in the Packers being the better team to all of his House colleagues in caucus. And so I snuck that cheesehead in to caucus one day, just a few weeks in when nobody even knew who I was, and immediately proceeded to rub in how the line still hadn't made it. And that cheesehead has been on all of my desks in the legislature ever since. But despite all that bound us together in fun and professionally, our friendship grew because of much more important foundations in our families, in our values of family and our belief in Christ. Tom loved family, and we talked about it all the time. He was so in love with Diane and with his children. He loved to tell stories about his own childhood and his sisters and his parents. I remember one story about how he was snowmobiling with one of his sisters, and they had a near accident, and they got the machine back in and parked it and went into the house and didn't ride for a while, but they didn't tell their dad what had happened. I remember the stories he told about working with his dad and his first time driving a log truck, or how much his mother took care of them, especially in those early morning hours when they get up to go out to the job. He was incredibly proud of the success of his children, and I watched all the worries and fears about them as they were moving from kids into adulthood melt away as they started their own families and got their own jobs. He's so proud, and he adored his grandchildren. But nothing mattered more to Tom than knowing and following Jesus Christ. He was incredibly faithful to the Wednesday morning Bible study here in Lansing and to his church at home. He even did a little preaching. This faith impacted every decision and position he took, sometimes during debate and votes, and other times after the debate and votes. He took the time to apologize and set the record straight when he had shared bad information because of his faith. It's why he didn't shrink away from setting the record straight when lies and rumors about his integrity came. Tom was a man of integrity who valued truth, a commodity this form of government and society depend on, and its decline is at the root of our diminishing ability to execute both. He'd often compliment me on my ability to share these things with words, but Tom was the true master because he spoke plainly and directly. He wasn't worried about the art or the nuance. He spoke as a man convicted that lies and greed could not be left unconfronted or unanswered. He also knew that truth without love is simply noise and wins few listeners. Tom loved people. Beyond the love he had for his family, he loved his neighbors in the UP and in Lansing. He cared about the members that he served with, often telling me how much he appreciated a colleague from either side of the aisle or either side of an issue. And he didn't have to articulate his love because Tom didn't believe in leading with his faith on the sleeve or that it would win anyone over, but that living life and truth according to the word and to faith with love could. There's a verse that's come to my mind about Tom for many years since we became friends. He has been that friend who sticks closer than a brother. When my brother died, Tom dropped everything to be there for me. And I know he did this for others in their times of loss. And now he's gotten to go on to glory, leaving us all behind, and I miss him. I miss our fellowship, how we sharpened each other, made each other better men and better legislators. I miss having that friend who knows what I'm going through here and back at home. And I'm overwhelmed by sitting here in this chamber less than 4 years after he did and being at a podium to speak on his memorial resolution. So in his memory and to honor him one final time here. In the mutual hope that Tom have, I give this speech to give one last chance for him to testify to you all how critical it is to seek truth and find eternal life with God. Tom died the way he lived, confident to the end that his God, in whom he believed, would be faithful to keep all Tom committed to him for that day. I know I'm going to see him again. For I know that my Redeemer lives, and he shall stand at last on the earth. And after my skin is destroyed, this I know, that in my flesh I shall see God. Thank you, Mr. President, and all my colleagues for listening and giving me a few minutes to remember one of the dearest and best God has, and the UP, has ever sent to serve. May God bless you all and give you comfort, and to give comfort to the Casperson family and friends. I'd like my remarks printed in the Journal.
Thank you, Senator. Senator McBroom asks that his remarks be printed in the Journal without objection, so ordered. The President recognizes the senator from the 36th District, Senator Stamas.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's truly an honor to have the opportunity to serve with Tom for 10 years, 6 of those in the same chamber together. Cannot recall, nor do I want to try to add up the hours I've sat in Natural Resource Committee hearings, and as he discussed so many important topics, not only for the UP, but for the entire state. Just to share a couple moments that I will always remember was in one of those committees. The discussion was on wolves, and it was a nice, lively conversation. And I sort of decided to make a comment such as, well, if the Lower Peninsula is so concerned about the wolves in the UP and maintenance of it, then maybe we ought to bring them down here as well. And his face when I saw it was like, I've always wanted to say that, but there was no way I was going to say it. And so I had the opportunity to go to the UP many times with Tom and travel and get to know and see the people that he loved, his communities, the passion that he had, the vibrance of our great Upper Peninsula. He was never short on the opportunity to talk about his family or the Lord. But I 100% agree with you, Ed. He walked the faith. He walked the faith. While up in the UP the one time, we had the opportunity to get in a 4-seat plane to go learn how they do the counting of the moose. And we're flying around, and you turn left and you swing back to the right, and we were able to find, I think, 12, I don't know, maybe it was 14 moose that we were able to spot from the air. And we're like 300 feet up in the air. And we said, okay, we've seen, they said, we've seen enough moose. We have a wolf that's actually, we're picking up the signal, so we're going to try to see if we can't spot the wolf. And that's usually difficult, but we're going to try. And so the plane starts circling in one direction, and we're not seeing it. And all of a sudden, he turns and he starts circling the other way. And then he turns and starts circling the other way. And I do pretty well in planes. But about the 5th time, he started turning the other way, and my face is about green. And I said, I think I'm good. And Tom reached over. He's sitting next to me. He put his hand on me. You can see my face is just beating with sweat. And I've got the little vent open, full blast, and this is winter. And he goes, thank you. I was too afraid to ask. But these are moments that I will cherish, but I will not forget the opportunities that I saw with Tom, Senator Boer, who fought for our Natural Resource Trust Fund changes to make a continued difference for our state as well. And that went on the ballot and passed with the support of Michigan. And it is an amazing accomplishment that he worked for years to accomplish. I will miss you, Tom. Well done, good and faithful servant. Thank you. I ask my remarks to be printed in the journal.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Stamas asks that his remarks be printed in the journal. Without objection, so ordered. President recognizes the Senate Majority Leader, Senator Shirkey.
Thank you, Mr. President. I stand before you today. Let me be the surrogate for the last word for today's celebration. We all have sad hearts, but we all have fond memories of our friend and colleague, Tom Casperson. I'm not going to repeat the stories and the sentiments of the previous two speakers. Frankly, just about everybody in this chamber could stand up and share a fond, memorable memory of Senator Casperson. But allow me a minute to stand here before you and as the advocate as we share a few final words. Like many of you, I'm proud to have known him and call him friend. My heart is heavy, but it's also joyful. Our hearts, by God's creation, allows us the capacity to be sad and joyful at the same time. For 27 years, Tom worked in his family's log business in Escanaba. He was the third generation and very proud of that fact. But it's Tom's pride, his commitment, his hard work caused him to do double duty for 14 of those 27 years as he both had his thumb and his hand on the wheel of the business and also served here in the legislature, contributing in both ways, in major ways. Tom's list of accomplishments and leadership roles in the legislature is long and remarkable. But it wouldn't do Tom justice just to talk about what he did. As previous speakers have referenced, in many ways, what's really memorable is how he did it. Tom was a great listener. Such a great listener, in fact, that his ears were clearly not enough because he put his heart into every conversation and to every person that he interacted with. He worked hard to find common ground on even the most toughest and contentious issues. And more often than not, he was successful. As I said, the list of Tom's accomplishments is long, but there is one that comes to mind that stands out that I'd like to talk about briefly. And this is mainly because it encapsulates the kind of public servant Tom really was, the guy who would do whatever it took to serve his community. In 2018, a 1,000-year flood wiped out large parts of the city of Houghton and large parts of the county. 5.5 inches of rain fell in just less than 6 hours, and that was more than enough to collapse homes and roads and cause untold millions of dollars of damage. What did Tom do? He got to work, just like he always did. He got funding in place to help those families and those communities rebuild as quickly as possible, and he did this all while battling a vicious enemy that he was suffering himself with cancer. Though a listener, collaborator, and friend are clearly accurate labels for Tom, they do not represent the complete wake that he left when he left this chamber. Those of you who remember that last lame duck when Tom was here with us, now many of us refer to it not as lame duck, but as flame duck. Because all this talk about Tom getting along and finding solutions for things, he left us with a memorable, lasting impression because he single-handedly had an arm's-long length list of legislation to be processed through lame duck, which is now called flame duck, because he accomplished one thing that nobody would ever expect out of Tom Casperson. He pissed off just about everybody in Lansing for the purpose of accomplishing some very, very good things. He'll be remembered as a fighter and a servant, absolutely a follower of Christ, and a lion among those who knew him. But most of all, he will be remembered as a devoted husband and a loving father. As a testament to his indelible mark Tom left on everybody, we're joined here today by Diane and his enormous and loving and faith-filled family. And in a year that we've all experienced, a year plus of this insidious virus, which has interrupted our ability to love, to grieve, to heal, and to celebrate, I'm glad that we were able to do that today with and for Tom and his family. Though our hearts are heavy, I still think we can have joy. We can have joy knowing that where Tom is. And he now is experiencing God's promise. Eyes have not seen, ears have not heard, all the things that God is now preparing for the saints like Tom that love the Lord. Thank you, Mr. President. I'd ask my remarks to be printed in the journal.